I've been thinking a lot about what my next writing project should be. I'm getting really close to finishing the first draft of my super long fantasy book, and I think I want a bit of a distraction from something else before diving into revisions. I still have time to decide, but nailing down what's next might give me that extra boost of motivation to draft these last chapters. Only, deciding is harder than it usually is. Now that I'm querying, I've been thinking a lot about what's marketable. Clearly not a multi POV fantasy book series. This is the series of my heart, but it's definitely not debut material. So I'm relying on my thrillers to get me an agent. If the one I'm querying now doesn't work out, then I may need another. Or I could go back to the other four sitting on my laptop, which means I have enough material to query for a long time. This opens the door for me to write the next fantasy book, or a thriller that isn't as marketable, maybe the historical thriller, but I've had another thought recently that makes me excited. It feels right somehow. Welcome back to my writing channel. My name is Josie, and I think I figured out what I want to work on next. So, for some context, I wrote thrillers for a while. So, for 5 years, I kind of wrote one thriller a year. And it was always really easy for me to decide which writing project to pick because it was just like the next one I had brainstormed, the next one on my list. There was once that I actually skipped over a project and then ended up going back to that project after because this new idea, that was the fourth thriller I wrote, was just like singing to me in a way. And I was like, I need to get this out of my system. So the last thriller I wrote, my mountaineering thriller that I'm now querying, was actually supposed to have been my fourth thriller that I wrote, I think, but then it got pushed a little bit. And then once I finished that fifth thriller, I was kind of looking around, deciding if I should go for a thriller next, if I should change things up. And I was even contemplating like writing a kind of like a paranormal romance. There were some other things kind of sitting in the wings that I had dreamed up of. But I decided to try tackling this big fantasy series that I had been thinking about for a very long time. So I have almost now written the full first draft and it's going to come in probably at 160, 170,000 words, which is double the length of what a thriller was for me. So it has been a lot of work and I think I need a break before diving into revisions for it. So I've been playing around with the idea of like, what should I do next? Should I go back and do one of these thrillers? Should I write the next fantasy book? I don't really know. Especially now that I've started querying, it's added like a new problem, a new way of looking at this. Because before I was just like, I just want to write whatever I think is most fun and most exciting next. Like, I've never worried about marketability. I've never worried about trying to write something that will appeal to someone else. I've always just written what I want to write. But now that I've started querying and now that I've started reading so much more about what the market wants, what it dislikes, it makes me a lot more hesitant to dive into just like the next thriller I'm the most excited for because that thriller happens to be a historical thriller. And I think it's super cool, the concept. I love the time period it's in. But from what I've seen online, historical, especially pre 20th century, so before the 1900s, not super popular. And I don't think the time period I'm choosing, well, there have been a lot of books written in that time period, but with the specific circumstances and location, I don't think so. So it's kind of novel, but at the same time, historical already seems like a difficult sell. So mixing it between historical and thriller, I don't know if it'll make it more or less likely. If I was continuing on with the method that I had previously when I was going from thriller to thriller, I would just dive right into this historical thriller. I wouldn't think about the market. I wouldn't have let that influence me at all. I wouldn't have even like known it to be an influence on what I should pick. But now that I do know that, I've been debating skipping ahead to another thriller idea I had that is present day and I think a lot more marketable. Like it's a lot more buzzy and hooky with the current stuff that's being published. But the issue was I didn't have a lot figured out for it. Some of my thriller ideas come fully fledged with the ending already in mind. Sometimes the ending is what came to me first. And then other thrillers come to me as just like the premise and the starting out. And then I don't really know where it ends. And that's the case for the second thriller I was thinking about. It's a little bit of like a culty, isolated book with some like power dynamics at play. That's like the major theme and I didn't really know where I wanted to end it. I had like 4 or 5 different options of like where I could take it, but nothing quite fit. So I ended up spending a handful of hours over this past week really playing around with the idea and trying to figure out where I could take it, what could be that twist, what could be like that final oomph. Like I'm kind of thinking when I'm thinking of the end of a story, I'm thinking of the set piece, right? Like what is this major conflict that is going to go down? Like what are we moving towards in this whole story? And I think I figured it out, and I'm really happy with what I came up with because I think it really complements the themes I already had in play. So that's good. So now I have this concept that I think is more marketable and could be a good next book to query if my mountaineering book doesn't work out. And I'm feeling really good about the characters, the story. I honestly want to write this. Like, I'm excited to write this. I'm anticipating trying to deal with some of these like character interactions and conflicts and diving into that, but I just don't know if it feels right for this moment because I don't really have to be concerned about what I'm querying next. So for those 5 years when I was writing those five thrillers, I was on a student visa in the US. And so I wasn't even like able to publish anything. So I have four other novels that I could query before having to produce a new manuscript, which means I technically have the freedom to just like continue with the fantasy series if I want. And honestly, maybe that's a good idea, right? To not lose some of that like momentum and the character arcs that I have going. The longer I spend between writing these books, maybe I lose like, the magic of it, the character voice, like what I was really intending. So it might be good just to dive into the next one. But I think after drafting for so long, like usually my first drafts take me like 2 to 3 months, and I'm now on my seventh month of drafting this fantasy book. I think I need something else. Like I need to just do like a complete project that won't take me as long. Like the idea of going into the second book and having to write like another 160 to 180,000 words, like that seems like such a huge momentous task. Then I had an idea, and I honestly haven't been able to get it out of my head. So, all five of my thriller books, I'm really proud of. I really like them. They're all very different, but each of them have something like special about them, at least to me. But the first one of the five that I wrote, I was really figuring out how to write a thriller. A lot of it was pantsing. I didn't really outline that first one very much. It was another situation where I didn't really know where I wanted the ending to go. I had a couple things tossed up in the air. The original ending, if you ever end up reading that book, the original thing I was thinking about making the reveal is kind of bonkers. What I wanted to do. So I'm a lot happier with what I came up with. But I've had this itch for a couple years now to go back to it. I think it was sometime last year actually. I pulled it up and started reading it. And I just had this idea for this new conflict to add between the characters. And it doesn't really change the story a lot, but it kind of adds this new angle that I think would be really cool. My grand idea is to go back to that first book, give it a read through, and add this new element as well as edit it to the standard that I have today. Because it has been 5 or 6 years now since I wrote that, and I'm sure my writing has changed. And I'm not like revamping the book completely, like most of the storyline is the way I want it to be. I'm just talking about maybe doing like another draft, maybe two drafts, and seeing where I can take that book. Because another pro about going back and doing that is it's not going to take me a full year to write a whole new book. It's only going to take me potentially a couple months to do those revisions, which would then give me enough time away from the first draft that I'm writing to go back into the second draft, excited, ready to go. So I feel like the timing of that works really well and in my favor because then that book could be ready to be queried if the mountaineering book fails, as well as the other three thrillers that I have on the back burner. So I'm technically working on a project that I could query in the future. So I'm still making progress. I feel really good about this idea of doing these revisions rather than starting a brand new story. But I feel like as well, my mind keeps changing like every week, every couple of weeks. Part of the reason why I like coming up with this plan, this next idea, is because it forces me to actually finish the thing I'm working on at like a decent pace rather than like letting it linger because I don't know what I'm going to do when it ends. And that's kind of scary. But this is by no means set in stone. In the next couple of weeks, as I wrap up draft one of my fantasy book, I may change my mind again. Something may come to me, and I have a spark of an idea that I think is incredible and I want to pursue. But I feel like this is a good plan.